Welcome back to the Press Club. Earlier on, we were talking about coverage of the throne speech, coverage of the budget. All of that ties in to preparations for the general election. And we have discussed at length before the media's approach to covering general elections. Do you see that changing as we approach the time?
Not this time. I think the local press has ruled itself out of playing the most important role that it could have played in the current juncture, which is to get involved in the promotion of debates between candidates. As you would recall, young people started the ball going into constituencies. Right. They didn't get the engine running on all pistons, but you know, they got the vehicle on the road, and there was what I thought was a prime opportunity for us in the press to say, okay, we have St. Lucians now more than ever, when we have more TV and more access to international news than ever. St. Lucians can see on a daily basis the role that the U.S. press is playing in the presidential nomination debates, to the extent that the press is not only just involved in asking the questions at the debates, but the press coverage of the debates, of the nomination process, is also itself coming under scrutiny by the public and by the politicians. There you have Donald Trump earlier this week becoming the only contender in the Republican race, to the extent now that the Republicans who don't support him, including the Bush brothers, are now even saying that rather than support Trump, they're prepared to support Hillary Clinton. What does that say? Yeah. Trump himself is saying, listen,
don't forget you had the head of the Republican Party also come out before and say, I'm going to throw my support behind whoever wins. But now that it's Trump, he says, you know,
they start burning the Republican membership cards online. You know, you look at Trump is accusing the press of not having given him a chance, even though they gave him the most publicity, which him as a media manipulator was able to make use of. Then you have Bernie Sanders and his camp complaining about the fact that the mainstream media ignored them and didn't give him a chance in the beginning, and he has ended up in history as the longest lasting you know, third place person, to the extent that what we're seeing now, the press in the United States has got to the point now where they are forced to begin to look at the possibilities down the road of a Trump presidency. So the US press is asking, how will Trump get to make the Mexicans pay for the war? How will Trump deal with Arab countries when he bans Muslims from abroad from coming in?
Yeah, but you see, that is an issue that has been raised over and over, not just about the American press's coverage of general elections, but ours as well. We focus too much on the horse race, how Trump is doing in the polls, how Trump is leading in what states, area, you know, who has the youth vote, how Bernie Sanders is able to attract the youth vote. Nobody thought to question Trump on how do you plan to do these things? What is your foreign policy? What is your mode of attack to deal with this issue or that issue? You know, but here we are, like you said, building him up. You know, every outrageous statement he makes, you know, you run with it. You know, you have breaking news. Trump lands in San Francisco, and you're expecting, you know, a storm alert or something. You know, who cares?
It's now in terms of our coverage, we see, again, I'll refer to the fact that last Saturday, Laverne Spencer became the #1 high jumper in the world. A week later, 5 days later, the big headline is Sarah Flood returning as a Castries Central candidate. And a week before that, the big story was Stephenson King has returned to the UWP. Now, I'm not aware that Stephenson King ever left the UWP. I know that Sarah Flood started off with Labour, left Labour, joined One, then supported UWP, then fell out with the UWP, then came back, contested against Alan Shastley and said, you know, St. Lucia, the party could never win under him. And I recall saying in a commentary that there's more to her, to that supposed challenge to Shastley than before, because the day after the convention, he said that she's going to be playing a role in the election. And I interpreted that. I remember calling somebody who has been a victim of that and saying, watch your bread. You know, and it has come to pass. But that's the big story. That story is considered bigger than Laverne Spencer, who's going to her third Olympics in Rio, is heading there as the top high jumper today as we speak. You know, these things change with every race. It's not like you win a Nobel Prize and you have it forever. But in her moment of glory, you would think that us in the press would look to, again, be sons and daughters of St. Lucia and love the land that gave us birth and bask in the sunshine and the glory of the fact that one of our nationals is the top in the world. Even though for a minute, a day, a month, or a year. But,
but the question has been asked of the media globally, internationally, and I'll ask you, do you think the politicians and the media think that people are not, the general public, the voters are not intelligent enough to be able to consume the hard news, the heavy news, the developmental issues, you know, that should, for any right-thinking, intelligent person, occupy the news?
Politicians generally tend to be accused of not sufficiently respecting the level of awareness of the people. And in our part of the world, politicians have historically been described as thriving on keeping people in ignorance and therefore not dealing with
but now you have the media being lumped together with the politicians.
Now people have other sources of information. In the United States, whoever thought 10 years ago that the word socialism would have been part of a presidential election in the United States and that a so-called democratic socialist candidate would be given so much of a strong run to the establishment candidate, who is Hillary Clinton, who has support in both Republican and Democratic leadership thing. So that I do not think so. I think people have sources, they have access to information. That is why young people are able to do and say so much more about what they don't like about our politics. And I think that I heard a phrase yesterday which I took a note of. It had to do with the role of IT in politics and the way it can give particularly the young people a platform to influence politics. And I think that it's in that sense that we should not even bother to think that any politician would dare dream of describing an electorate as a bunch of idiots.
But is the media playing catch up then? I look at the case of President Carter, for instance. There's a famous story of the reporter from Playboy who did the interview with him. Over an hour sat and spoke about international relations and foreign policy and economic development. In leaving the interview, President Carter made a, well, he wasn't president at the time, made a casual statement about his relationship with his wife. The fact that he was a human being, that he had seen beautiful women, been attracted to them, and had impure thoughts. And an entire article.
That was the story.
That was the story.
Yeah, that you know, the president harbored impure thoughts.
And it almost cost him the election. You know, so are we seeing that same thing being played out, where you focus on, as the SLP has accused the media of focusing on the trivial issues, not focusing on the important substantive issues that ought to be given, airtime and print too?
People cannot influence the media. The media is not a piece of dough that you could take and shape how you want. The media in any country is a reflection of the press in that country. And whether we accept it or not, what we see, read, and hear from the local media is what is its capacity to produce. Because you will have journalists or reporters who might have their own view on an issue, but as to whether, and I've read and heard reports written and said locally, where journalists and reporters would say, listen, I was going after that story, but I couldn't complete it because it involved a business that is a strong advertiser. Now, that is as much self-censorship and censorship as imagining a politician standing over your shoulders and watching what you write. But that is an everyday factor. I remember on one of my first shows in my latest radio life, the station was advertising an activity, Men in Heels, to show awareness for cancer. I went on the air as an individual. I say again, nobody making me put high heels in my foot to go and run if that's how they expect me to show my cancer. Let me tell you, the dress down I got after that about the implications of what I said, and it possibly going to prevent people from coming and support the show. I recognize the sensitivity of the station, the employer, the advertising people on the issue, but I didn't feel good that I couldn't go on air and say how I feel. So I did. I said how I felt. I didn't repeat it, but I felt I had to say how I feel. Now, that type of censorship and self-censorship is as bad, like I said, and no less than being censored by politicians.
Stifled. Unfortunately, Mr. Bousquet, we are out of time. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure having you here. Always a pleasure having you tune in and watch. Hopefully you'll join us again next week for another program. Until then, have yourselves a safe and enjoyable weekend.